October 28, 2019 meeting of the Rutherford County Regional Planning Commission. If you would stand with us, please. Commissioner Chip Pinion will lead us in our prayer and our pledge. Chip.
Let's pray. Father, we just thank you so much for this day and for your love for us. We thank you for allowing us the time to come together today and to work the things that need to be taken care of for the county, Father. And we thank you for our county. We thank you for allowing us and the privilege to come and to serve. Father, pray we not take that for granted. We pray today that you'd give us wisdom, knowledge, understanding that we need to, as we go through our docket this morning, that you just help us. Father, we just thank you for all those that are serving our country abroad today and at home. We ask you to continue to be with them, be with their families, continue to meet their needs when only you can. Again, we just thank you for this day. We thank you for all that you do for us. We love you so much. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. You may be seated. Call the roll, please, Gail.
Charlotte P.
Here.
Chip Pinion.
here.
Craig Lynch.
Yes.
David Jones.
Here.
Jim Averwater.
Here.
Lee Bogle.
Here.
Marvin Whitworth.
Here.
Mike Cush.
Present.
Pettis Reed.
Here.
Ron Allen. Here. Jeff Phillips.
Present.
We have quorum.
Thank you, Gail. This time we need to approve the minutes for our September 9th meeting. I'll call on Vice Chair Mike Cush.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Those meeting minutes have been reviewed, and I make a motion for approval. Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve the September 9th minute meetings. All those in favor of that motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you. We have one item that's been withdrawn. That's item 6B3, 19-2068. That item will not be discussed this morning. And getting that out of the way, under new business, item 6A, these items are submitted for preliminary plan approval. 6A1, the item number is 19-1012, the View at Lytle Creek, 135 lots on 73.75 acres on PUD located along Lytle Creek Road. Robert Stroop is the applicant. Doug?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, thank you, and good morning, Commissioners. Hope everybody's doing well this morning. You'll probably recognize this property. This was rezoned fairly recently by the Board of Commissioners. It was rezoned to PUD back in April of this year. The preliminary plan is consistent with the concept plan that was in the applicant's powder book. The staff did have several comments on this, one of them regarding the water lines in that area. Water lines will have to be improved in order to be able to meet domestic and fire protection standards that are required. The applicant is aware of that, has made their awareness known on our staff comments when we received that back. Most of our comments as far as the zoning and different issues with the PUD pattern book have been resolved. However, as you recall, there were a lot of discussion about the soils on this property during the Planning Commission meeting when this rezoning came forward, and for that I'll turn it over to Mike to let him discuss in more detail.
All right, good morning. This property located on Lytle Creek Road, like Doug was saying, had some concerns that we had raised to the applicant, and they have performed a hydrologic determination for a couple of the creeks that run through here. There's Lytle Creek that's also on the east or western edge, I should say, right here on the side. And then this one has been determined, which shows up on our layer as a stream as well. There's another one that does not, but as you can see, there are several drainage paths through the property. And looking at the soil, that was one of the things that we are going to talk to the HD professional about. The state did go out with the HD professional when he performed the hydrologic determination, but they didn't come up with anything other than the streams. But I need to follow up and check on the soils. They've got some that are questionable. This Tupelo, Rowan, Egum soil, those are all typically hydric soils. And if you remember our training that you've got the hydric soils, water flow, and if the land was left alone, it's probably going to return to a wetland. So that's kind of what I'm wanting to clarify on that. So they did look at the streams and said, yes, this is a stream that runs through here, and you could see it's straight as an arrow, and it was most likely installed by a farmer a long time ago to help with the drainage in this area. So, but over the years, it's healed itself and become a stream with life and vegetation in there. So they'll have to have a buffer on that, which they do show. They do show stream buffers on either side of it, and this is going to be in an open space, which will be maintained by a homeowners association. So other than the streams and the soil, we've got another issue that we need to address. And I know this is all construction plans, but I'm just giving you the heads up, what I look at when I see a preliminary come through. We've got, because of Lytle Creek, there is a flood zone. So a lot of these lots will be impacted by the FEMA special flood hazard area. And that's not to say that they can't develop there. It's just that they've got some special requirements. They've got to elevate the lots 1 foot, at least 1 foot above the base flood elevation. The floor would be at least 2 more feet above that. So a total of 3 feet above these known elevations that FEMA studied. So when we add fill to the flood zone in the county, we were asked that they provide a compensating cut somewhere. So that's going to be a challenge, as being as flat as this is. But Jamie's got a sharp pencil. He thinks he can make it work, and we'll take a look at it at the construction plan. So, and the third thing, you've got a fill, you've got a compensating cut, and then you've got a detention pond that has to function when the creek is at its flood stage. So when the creek's up, the pond's still got to function and make sure it can work. So that's something that we'll be looking at the construction zone, the construction plan. And I'm just giving y'all a heads up. These are things that we look at.
Mike, what is the brown area there? You have the
that's a 500 year.
Okay.
500 year. We don't regulate to the 500 year storm event. Thank goodness. So just the blue is the 100 year, or what they call now the 1% chance. So people would think, well, we had a storm 10 years ago, 100-year storm 10 years ago. We won't have another one for 90 years. That's not the case. It's a statistical chance that the water will rise up to this elevation is a 1% chance every year. So, and you can have multiple 1% chance 100-year storm events in a watershed in the same year. So I mean, it's something that we have to, hope for the best but plan for the worst kind of thing. So, but going back to this, let me turn off.
Hey, before
Okay.
you do that,
Whoops. So this
Greg,
is.
go ahead.
Go. I'm sorry.
What the percentile is on the 500, you say it's 1%?
It's a 0.2%, so it's even smaller percent.
Like 1 in every 5 years.
It could happen, but FEMA and the county both regulate to the 100-year storm event or the 1% storm event. So,
All right, Mike.
Yes, sir.
The horizontal squiggly black lines, starting at the top, you've got a 655, then going down 656, 657. Is that the 100-year proposed
those are the
elevation?
base flood elevations, those are averaged, and it could be. We go by the straight lines more because these are known cross sections. Here.
Okay.
And this is kind of like, well, it could be 4/10 above, could be 4/10 below. These are the base flood elevations, the squiggly lines are.
All right, so in terms of an additional 1 foot of fill for floor elevation, you're only concerned about the 656.7 red solid line.
Yes, sir, right.
Okay.
And, you know, what they'll do, there's certain means and methods and procedures to check this, and Jamie will design, or his team will design for this, and we'll follow up and make sure he's done it properly. So, like I was saying, the ground which the house sits on needs to be 1 foot above these base flood elevations, roughly. And then the finished floor 2 more feet above that, the livable space, 2 more feet above that. So
2 more feet above this solid line, or 2 more feet above the 1
above
foot?
the 1 foot, the minimum. So it's a total of 3 feet above. Yes.
Okay.
So, and that gives us a little factor safety. You know, some communities go 4 feet above. So some communities less, but that's what we've settled on, and that's what we hold them to. So we've got to fill lots, we've got to compensate the cut, and we got to have a detention pond so that works when the flood stage is up. So it's going to be a challenge.
Mike,
Yes, sir.
the man-made water conveyance here, you
Yes,
did
sir.
say it was man-made water conveyance?
I would assume so. Looks like it follows along this fence row. And
Right. My question is, does it flow to the creek?
Yes, sir.
All right. Has this property been tiled 50 years ago for drainage?
It has. When you say tiles, you mean culverts or
Well, no,
under
has
drains?
somebody gone through these fields and put drainage tiles in to take this to this conveyance and then to the creek in order to get water off of it so they can farm it?
I do not know, Jamie. Not that
Who would know
Jamie
that?
Reed. Have y'all surveyed this one
Yeah,
yet?
yeah, we surveyed, this is Mr. Stroop's property, which I'll know, you've been here forever, but Rick Marshall is his contractor that's gonna build the subdivision. He's been farming this for years. But the soils out there are are good soils, he says. They've farmed every bit of that, even in the floodplain, all that's good soils. But as far as knowing if there's tiles and stuff, I just know that the way the contours are right now, where everything drains, it all drains to those locations. Now, that one that splits it from north-south, that's a creek, that's a wet weather conveyance through there, it
Yeah.
carries it through there
They
too.
consider this as a wet weather conveyance. Only has water in it when it rains.
Yeah, but you can see the contours, it falls naturally, it falls all the way down through there. It's got good fall
Well,
across the side. Well, it's got fall.
it's got fall.
I wouldn't say good. We're left with what's.
Not even
It's
enough
another.
fall.
It's another one.
That's right.
Blows the right direction.
That's right, yeah.
Jamie, this is another one of Jamie's diamonds in the rough. Yeah.
In that creek, if it has been tiled, that was my question, next question, but if it has been tiled, there should be some evidence in that creek. Now, it's
Should
straight.
be. Have you checked the creek to see if there's tile, if there are tile empty?
I haven't seen anything, no, sir, I haven't been into the creek or anything like it. I haven't seen anything that labels that from the HD report or TDEC. Now, TDEC is also, when Mike mentions the HD report as far as the soils and my guys going out there, TDEC has already approved this entire site.
And they were, like I said, they were out here.
They were
on the
out
site,
there on site.
looking at this. So that gives me a higher comfort level.
Yes, it's not just an HD report, which we all hear that all the time. It's, you get an HD report, then TDEC goes out there and verifies it. TDEC's already been out there and verified this, so I do know entire site's good. Mike wants me to go out there and double check
I'll
some hydric.
clarify with TDEC about
The hydric
soils.
soils, yeah.
If they saw any hydric soils out here. Just what I'm looking at is the old USDA soils maps that we've got, from the 60s, 70s, and 80s, where they were established for farming. But that gives me an indication, okay, in the past, if I saw some Tupelo or Dalton soil, I'd say, ooh, we need somebody to pay special attention to that. And that's kind of what I'm asking Jamie to verify for me. So, but I have a better comfort level knowing that TDEC was out there with their
And approved
hydrologists
Balance the
looking at
site.
this.
So if he's got a fill,
So, but
he's got a balance with the
soils,
cut and fill.
flood zone, and then drainage. We've got some flat areas. This little corner right here is like 0.2%, 0.25%. So that's flat as a tabletop right there. I think the floors in the Goldstein building slope better than that. So that's some of the challenges I see. I know these are construction plan, things that we'll have to look at. But Jamie and his team do really good work. So I'm just giving y'all a heads up that these are things that I'm looking for. And it's, like I said, it's a diamond in the rough, but he if anybody, Jamie, can make it work.
And most of the ones we're dealing with now got the wetland issues, the cut and fill balance. That's about all we're left with, only some of these subdivisions now. But most all of them are dealing with, if they're not wetlands, there's some drainage concern of cut and fill and draining more onto somebody else. But here is, I mean, this is not any different than, you know, South Haven or any of the ones we're dealing with creeks and floodplains. We're still filling in the floodplain. We're doing compensating cut and fill, and we're verifying it with Mike for those volumes.
So what I'm kind of giving him a heads up as well. I said, well, if, you know, we've got some narrow lots, and how narrow are these, Jamie?
No, these are the, well,
So
these
a
are
little
actually the
bit
bigger
wider.
lots.
Okay.
Yeah, they're the 70s and stuff like that. Well, there's some, no, I take it back. There's some 60s in there
Okay.
on that far side.
So if we need some additional drainage easements or whatnot, that's going to eat into the buildable space, and I'm just kind of giving him a heads up. Say, hey, there's a lot of drainage coming through here that we've got to pick these up. See, there's a drainage path through here. There's this creek here. There's one here. There's one crossing here and here. I mean, there's just it's a confluence of a lot of flow paths. So I'm just kind of giving him a heads up and giving y'all a heads up as well.
Definitely need fill.
I don't mean to alarm you, but these are things that we look for and tell we tell Jamie, so we're going to be looking at these as well. So he's going to have to address all of these issues at the construction plan phase before he can start moving dirt. So he's got to get all these things figured out. He's got to, Doug mentioned the water line. The step system's got to get approved through CUD, the water line additions, all kinds of things that need to go into this. So these are just some heads-up items that we're looking at.
But other than that, it's an overall good-looking subdivision.
Ideal, yeah.
That's my
I don't like to beat it to death like that on two little things, but
he also sells used cars on the weekends.
So the two things he mentions are like on every subdivision we deal with.
Oh
So
yeah,
it's the
yeah.
HD report.
All
or
the
cut
good
and fill
property's
balances,
gone, so it's harder and harder to find good land. But
Doug, from a planning perspective, when we got the preliminary, then we do the final. What are some things that we should be looking for more on the preliminary side that we wouldn't necessarily care about as much, or at the final side? What, from the two levels, what should we be looking more at?
Well, as far as what your role is right here, I think Mike's done a good job of outlining a lot of the things that we look at. I mean, what you're looking at, is, of course, is consistency with the plan development, which we've checked. Road name consistency, you make sure that they have been approved through 911. You're kind of looking at the overall picture, if you will. The nuts and bolts as far as where the pipes are going to go, where the drainage ways and all this other things, that's what Mike and his staff, and that's what they handle. So I think the thing that Mike's really just trying to convey here is that we're aware that this meets our requirements as far as a preliminary plan is concerned, but there are going to be issues that are going to arise that he's going to have to deal with before it even gets to the final plan stage. So,
and if I might remind you, what was it, Walnut Chase?
Yeah.
On Walnut Grove Road. Walnut Grove
Yes.
Road. Yes. They came in with plan development, said, hey, we're going to do these 150 lots or something like that, and it came back that they had a lot of wetland soils, a lot of wetlands there, so they had to drop back and punt.
that was, in that case, TDEC had not verified the HD, which now we push and we try to get all the HDs verified before we go further. In that case, the HD report hadn't been verified. Mike said, you might want to double check this. So we called the specialist and had him coordinate with TDEC, and then he come back and all of a sudden, boom, he's right. It's wetland soils. But in this case, TDEC's already been out on site, verified the HD report, approved it, and already certified and wrote us a letter back. Then Mike's got that.
So that gives me a lot more comfort level. So, and then one more thing that I'm looking at the bottom of the page, where Lytle Creek makes a 90-degree bend and Couch Road ties into it. They've got another road coming in here. We're going to have to sit down and sharpen our pencil on redesigning this intersection here so it functions a little bit
And they're
better.
missing a handicap access on that corner.
Oh,
there.
yeah. So we're also looking at the handicap accessibility, as Doug.
Yeah, and I mean, I guess all this to say that even if this is approved, that doesn't mean it's automatically they can go out there and start building tomorrow. I mean, there's still a lot that has to be done from the construction drawing standpoint, the conversations that have to happen regarding the alignment of that intersection right there. Those are all things we're going to look at before it ever gets to the final plat. And, you know, it's happened before. Well, it happened with Walnut Chase. They end up having to come back and completely redo that subdivision. As you remember, they lost 2/3 of the lots that they had in there. So they had to come back for an amendment to the plan development. So, you know, that can happen. That was with the preliminary plan being approved. So those things are still
And PUD.
are still out there. And right,
PUD
exactly.
and
Yeah,
preliminary
right,
and everything.
right.
So here's the mail kiosk in the corner of Palmetto Dunes Boulevard. And it's got a little parking lot and area. And this will be the only one for the subdivision,
Mhm.
Jamie?
Yes, sir.
So if there's, you know, like I said, a lot of these are construction plan issues that I see, and I apologize if I'm unloading on you, but I just want you to be aware that these are things that we're looking for and looking out, you know, to make sure that it functions properly. So when we do have residents living here, it's not an issue. We don't have to call the highway department or public works and say, hey, we've got some drainage issues. Can you come help these people out? We're trying to head them off on the front end.
We'll have a plan. I'll have all this worked out when this comes back to finals.
Yes,
When we
sir.
approve the
Right.
final,
So-
all this will be worked out.
Right. So the in between the preliminary and the final is the construction plan phase, and that's the nuts and bolts and how everything's supposed to work.
And that'll be by section, of course.
Yeah.
You know, they'll turn in section 1 first. We'll work through that. And then, you know, when they get to a point where they're getting ready to sell lots, that's when you'll see the final plat come in. If there's issues at that point with some of these concerns that we've brought up today, I mean, we'll make those known to you, as well as, you know, if they were addressed and then how they were addressed. And then if there's some discussion needs to happen as far as what was done or how comfortable staff is, I mean, that's something we can discuss at that time.
And also, they've got the as-bills now that Mike and them require. That's another double check at the very end before they even sign the final plat. So the as-bills got to match the construction plans that Mike approves. If not, we have to go back out there and we have to tell the contractor, here's items that need to be fixed before they'll sign the final plat.
Right.
So it's another
So
double
there's
check.
several checks and balances along the way, but like I said, I just feel that it's important that these be addressed on the front end. So if there is some changes that happen, they're aware of it on the front end.
And then also, you know why the
Right.
changes, right?
Make a motion to approve, subject to all your comments.
Yes, sir. Right.
We have a motion and a second to approve item 19-1012 for a preliminary plan for Lytle Creek. Any questions or comments? Just one particular maybe comment. All of the heartburn that you have has to be relieved to your satisfaction, and then you have to convince us
Yes, sir.
that things
Right.
are good
Yes, sir.
before anyone can start building out there.
Absolutely. Yes.
That
Before
you-
they start moving dirt at all, we've got to make sure.
That you'd
everything's
build a
been-
home out there.
Oh, yes, sir. If I'm not going to live out there, I don't want anybody else to either. So, yeah.
Other questions? All those in favor of the motion to approve, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? Motion to approve carries. Thank you. Item 6B, these are submitted for final plat approval. 6B1, 19-2065 and more. One lot subdivision, one lot on 1.8 acres, zoned RM, located off River Barfield Road. Anna Moore is the applicant. Includes a fire hydrant waiver. Doug?
Yes, sir, thank you. The applicant is proposing to divide approximately 1.8 acres off of the existing 9-acre tract The plat shows the closest fire hydrants over a mile away to the east. CUD has provided a fire hydrant determination letter to the applicant, which we do have a copy of in our file, stating that this water line cannot support a hydrant. So that is the reason that they are seeking the fire hydrant waiver. Besides the waiver, the plat itself is in good order. All of our comments have been addressed. So with that, I'll be happy to answer any questions you may have.
This house have to be sprinkled.
It's an existing house. Well, actually, no, I'm sorry. No, it's not. Since it's a one-lot subdivision, then no. It's anything 3 lots or greater.
Make a motion to approve.
We have a motion to approve. Do I have a second? And a second. Thank you. Any other questions or comments? We have a motion and a second to approve item 19-2065, Anna Moore. This is a one-lot subdivision. All those in favor of that motion to approve, please say aye.
Aye.
Is there any opposition? Motion to approve carries. Thank you. 6B2, 19-2067, Timber Ridge, Section 2, re-subdivision of Lot 39, 2 lots on 2.21 acres, zoned RM, located off Creek Stone Crossing and Friends Wood Lane. George Tomchak is the applicant. Includes a waiver from the subdivision regulations requiring adequate building sites.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Yeah, it's a kind of a mouthful, but overall, this is a pretty straightforward situation we're dealing with. The applicant wants to divide a portion of the subject property in order to transfer it to the owner of Lot 40, which is directly to the southwest. The time schedules between the buyer and the seller of those 2 lots don't quite coincide, and the applicants here can speak a little bit more to that. So essentially what he wants to do in order to sell off the house and the remaining portion of that property is to create this as a non-buildable lot until the time when the owner of Lot 40 can combine it with his property. That'll just take another re-subdivision plat. That wouldn't have to come back before you for anything, because at that point it would all be just one big buildable lot. So with that, as far as staff comments are concerned, the comments have been addressed. It's just, like I said, this is a little bit of an unusual situation. So with that, again, the applicant is present, and we'll be happy to answer any questions you might have. I did have a couple of just comments here that just from kind of follow up from the last comments. The stream buffer actually has to be measured from the top of the bank, not the center line of the stream, and they need to add the water quality buffer note. Those are pretty straightforward issues, and that really shouldn't affect what the applicant is proposing to do here. But before we will sign the final plat, we'll need to make sure those items have been addressed.
To summarize, what are the homeowners wanting to do?
He wants to create this for now as a non-buildable lot, that portion of 39B, so he can sell off the house and the rest of that lot, and then the remaining land would go to Lot 40
Right
at a
here,
future
at
time.
the-
Yeah, it'll be combined with Lot 40.
Okay.
Southwest.
So just changing that one non-buildable lot from one piece of property to the other.
Correct.
In a nutshell.
That's basically
Okay.
it, yes, sir. The timing just didn't quite work out enough that they could do it all at one time. was all.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion to approve with all staff comments.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve item number 19-2067, Timber Ridge Section 2, re-subdivision of Lot 39. Questions or comments? All those in favor of that motion to approve, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? Motion to approve carries. Thank you. 6B3, item number 19-2068. I'm sorry, this is the one that's been withdrawn?
I don't understand why you're going to that.
Never mind. Item 6C, this item is submitted for site plan approval, 6C1, 19-3061, True Gospel, construction of 3,865 square foot community assembly facility with associated parking on 3.562 acres, zoned RM, located along West Jefferson Pike. True Gospel Missionary Baptist Church is the applicant. Doug.
Yes, sir. Thank you. This site plan was originally approved by the Planning Commission back in April of 2005. There were some revisions to the site that were also approved, kind of a follow-up to that in September of that same year. Site plan approvals are valid for 18 months. Of course, this has gone a little bit beyond that. So they're asking for a reapproval of the site plan due to it have expired. The staff comments addressed several tweaks, if you will, that we asked the design engineer to make on this. Pretty much all those have been made. Just a couple of things. The height of the proposed structure, they're showing it as 45 feet. I believe is what it said, which is that's a little higher than what's allowed in that district. My guess is because it's like a hip or a gable type roof, which is actually measured a little bit differently. So I would ask them to clarify that on the site plan, just to double check that they still meet the requirements. Again, if it's a hip or gable or something like that, we do the measurement for the height a little bit differently, so it still may be conforming. We just need to verify that. They also need to provide drainage calculations for the pond. But other than that, I mean, the plan itself is pretty similar to what was approved when they came back for the revisions in September of 2015. So with that, I believe Bill Huddleston walked in just a few minutes ago, so he's present if you have any questions on this.
Yeah. And we had them updated from when it was approved originally to some of the things that we need to see now. One thing I did see that they've got a lot of good soil, and this is the area in the back that they're planning on using. But just to clean things up, we need to turn off this area that's not going to be used for a septic system, like in the pond and under the parking and the front driveway and whatnot. So just to help us be able to read better, it got turned on, I guess, inadvertently, but we, just minor housekeeping things like that.
Staff recommendation?
We recommend approval. Yeah, we're fine with it.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve 19-3051 for True Gospel. And that's including all staff comments. Any other questions or comments? All those in favor of that motion to approve, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? Motion to approve carries. Thank you. Doug, staff reports?
Yes, sir. You'll see that on the agenda, I wanted to have a little bit more discussion on the quarry setbacks. Upon further discussion and looking at some additional communities in our area, I've updated this chart. This first page is pretty much it is the same. There have been no changes to that. The second page that you see scrolling down, you'll see at the very bottom of this page we have Wilson County. I've spoken with their director just to kind of get the take of their regulations. You can see in I guess that's the fifth column there, the second from the right-hand side, what their requirements are as far as any setbacks and minimum sizes and everything. And then I also got some information from Bedford County, which is the one directly below that, which Mike will scroll down to, just to give you an idea. Since then, when I wrote this up on Friday, I had an email pending to the director over at Bedford County. They did supply a little bit of information regarding their buffering, that there is some buffering required. It's within their ordinance. It's not specific to quarries per se, so I didn't put anything specific in there at this point. But, I mean, that's something that, of course, can be looked at and update as necessary. So I just really kind of want to continue the discussion, from staff standpoint, at least from the commissions. Do you have the information that you want on this? And if so, are you comfortable at least moving this to a possible public hearing in front of the Planning Commission? Now, this, again, I will say, as far as the regulations are concerned, the only thing we are looking at really specifically is the setbacks. As far as the approval process for them, we're not proposing to make any changes to that. We would leave that zoned, or we leave the zonings as far as where they're allowed the same, which would be in the agricultural residential zone or the heavy industrial zone, and then they would only be allowed by special exception. We're not proposing to make any changes to that. Really, the only changes we're proposing to make would be to the setbacks. And again, that would just be reducing them roughly in half is what we'd be looking at between the residential and then the commercial and industrial areas, what we'd be looking at. But beyond that, that's the only changes that we were looking at, and that was the primary purpose of this report. I didn't pull up the entire report. We can if we need it. I haven't made any changes to it. I've really just updated this chart. So, but with that, I'll be happy to answer any questions or just kind of see where the discussion would go on this.
That setback would change from what to what?
Yes.
I'm sorry.
What it goes from what it is now to what it is.
Oh, I'm sorry. The current residential setbacks for residential property is 1,500 feet from any residentially zoned property. We'd be looking at 750 for that. That's the primary change.
And that's consistent with other plans?
Well, when you look at some of the, right, when you look at the chart, at least the ones that we've looked in this area, I mean, you can kind of see what some of the other jurisdictions around here are doing, and some that aren't even in Tennessee. You know, it's really all over the map. Yeah, I mean, you've got Smyrna on kind of the high end, 2 miles, you know, from residentially zoned property, church, schools measured from property lines. You've got some, like in Knox County, Tennessee, an industrial zone excavation area shall at least be 100 feet from any residential, agricultural, commercial zone, 200 feet from any dwelling platted subdivisions. You see some like Williamson County, where all structures, activities have a minimum 200 feet and then 1,000 feet from residentially zoned property. You see Batavia Township in Ohio is 500 feet. North Carolina looks like 50 feet. Shelby, North Carolina, it varies, 600, 700, or 1,000. I mean, just going down the list, it's like I say, it's all over the map as to where it is. So,
if we were to make or recommend this change, Doug, what benefit would it be to the county?
well, the biggest concern that staff looks at is whether or not we're doing something from an exclusionary zoning standpoint, even if not intentionally. In other words, you can't have uses, you can't just say a particular use is just totally excluded from a zoning ordinance. Okay, that's exclusionary. You just can't do that. However, you can regulate it, but if it's regulated so strenuously that you have, in essence, done the same thing, you've zoned it out, even though you say, oh, no, we're allowing it in these zones and by these processes, if the setbacks and the other regulations and things that it has to abide by, you've effectively eliminated them anyway. That's a potential. I'm not saying that that's what we've done here, but that's always something that we look at, not just for this, but really for any use in the county. So that's, I think, one benefit, at least, is, that maybe reduces our exposure to somebody making that claim.
Doug, this would apply to current rock quarries as well?
Expansions. Now, anything that's currently existing would be grandfathered at that point. I mean, there's really 3 that I can think of off the top of my head. You've got one off of Twin Oak, you've got one off of Burnt Knob, and then there's one off of Hickory Grove. There's one on the south side of the county that I can think about too, but I think it's right over the county line, as I remember. Yeah. But now for future expansions, if they wanted to add property, of course, now the grandfathering laws allow them to expand on their site. As far as that goes, there's not a whole lot we can do about that. But for adding new property to it, if they wanted to zone adjacent properties around it, or if somebody came in wanting to do a brand new quarry, yes, that would apply to them. Now, I will also say I don't see I'm going to have my door broken down by just an onslaught of new quarry operators should this be approved, if it goes through that process and it gets approved. I've been with the county now for over 13 years, and I have not seen an application for a new rock quarry. I have seen some interest in applications for existing ones, but never a new one.
Doug, the quarrying on John Bragg Highway and Shelbyville Highway, are those temporary? Were they approved as temporary quarrying?
There was one, if you're talking, the one that's on the north side of John Bragg Highway was approved more as a borrow pit.
I got you.
Now, the one that was done on Shelbyville Pike, that was done under a Type 3 conditional use permit that pretty much allowed him to do what he was doing.
Okay.
I know which one.
So they wouldn't fall under these.
They wouldn't.
setbacks.
Right. Well, yeah. If they were operating, I think the one on John Bragg, I want to say, are they even working out there anymore? Are they still working?
Yes.
They are still, okay. The one on Shelbyville Pike, though, yeah, he could continue because he got approval under older regulations and processes we don't use anymore. So he's grandfathered at that point.
Okay.
Doug, 750 would still be more than Wilson County, Bedford County, or Williamson County, correct?
Williamson County, I think, is 1,000, but Bedford and Wilson County, yes, it still would be more than those.
Did you check with Murfreesboro, Eagleville? Do they have any?
Murfreesboro doesn't really have any. Now, I didn't check with Eagleville City specifically, but I have checked with Murfreesboro. When I first did this chart, I called Murfreesboro, and they don't really have anything specific. for quarries as far as distances and things like that.
Yeah, the reason that I ask is that I know for a while you've been concerned about, the exclusionary aspect of this. And I guess my observation is having only having one other community in here, which is, inside the county, which is Smyrna, we're actually less restrictive than them. So, so from that standpoint, I guess my thinking is that's kind of that represents to me the mindset of our community, unless Murfreesboro or Eagleville or somebody has something contrary to that. So I'm just trying to make sure that, we're representing the county, as a whole.
Right.
The other question that I had is, you talked about setbacks, cutting those in half, but we've got the line in there that it would be a mile from a school. So are we going to cut that to a half a mile from a school?
We haven't proposed changing that.
Okay.
So,
And
yeah.
so then that goes back to my other question, or my other point, I guess, observation, is that, we're willing to protect our own asset by saying you have to be a mile away, but we're not willing to protect a residential, citizen's property by saying it's got to be, a significant distance away. So that just feels a little inequitable to me. We're looking out for us, but we're not looking out as much for them. That's what
Now,
it feels like.
right. Well, I mean, we can always take a look at the school. I mean, as you see from those different
I
things
don't
that we
want to
looked
drop it.
at.
I'm not suggesting
right.
dropping
Yeah.
it.
I mean,
I'm
we can
just
certainly
saying-
reduce that too.
Yeah, that was not the
Right.
point I wanted you to take away from my statement. Yeah.
Doug, and the reason I asked that a while ago, I remember this discussion. I remember when we discussed this the last time that we were on this, and we went back and forth on this, and just as what Commissioner here has said, this was one of the things we discussed quite a bit. And I guess the reason I was asking that, comparing those counties right there, I don't like to do anything based upon what somebody else does. I think I do it based upon what we do and what represents us, and we're going there. And I remember those, and the 1,500. I'm still okay with 1,500. I mean, when it deals with our residents and this sort of thing. So that's just where I am, and that's just what I said.
If we leave it like it is, would you anticipate more applications for quarries as we go into the future? If we were able to change it to 750 feet, would that better allow that property owner to utilize that property and maybe save us the aggravation of other quarry operators making applications?
Well, and like I said, yeah, I have yet to consider an application for a new quarry.
Right.
Honestly, I don't even get that many phone calls about it. So even if we change it to 750, I don't think we're just going to see a line of people forming and say, hey, we can put quarries in Rutherford County. It's still going to be a process that's going to have to be gone through at that point. For those that are existing that want to expand, it might make it a little easier for them to at least stay in the area where they are. Now, there's pluses and minuses to that, of course. It's a situation where, well, you know where it is now. You're dealing with the impact now. You know where it is. Is that better, or do you want to have a brand new one open up somewhere else in the county where you don't have as much control on something like that? So, that, again, you can argue that one either way, really.
And just a sidebar, if the state needs a quarry,
They get a quarry.
Yeah, they can quarry anywhere. They are exempt from our rules.
Right. Yeah.
And that's kind of what this is an old quarry for 99.
Yeah, there's a couple out that way.
Yeah, there's several down there.
Mount Pleasant, there's one off of there where they were working on the road. There's one there too.
That one at Rockwell is what they used to build the school.
Yes. Mhm. Again, a lot of what we're looking at too is just, what's our exposure look like as far as have we zoned them out, essentially, by, even though we allow them, the setbacks might be such that it's just not possible to operate one.
When we originally passed that 1,500 requirement, I thought that sounded reasonable at the time, but then, as we looked at it more and we had the blasting people come in, and we also saw how large of a parcel it takes to meet those requirements. Started thinking about our future requirements, whether it be road building, school building, county buildings, or homes, or whatever. How difficult it's going to be to get rock at some point in probably the not too distant future. We're going to essentially be trucking it in over the county lines, which is happening a lot right now. A lot of it's coming from Potts Quarry down there and towards Columbia, and a lot of it's coming out Bedford County. And those trucks are just running our roads. We're not getting a lot more extra miles, and we're not getting any benefit for it. But we're just sending more money out of the county. It's costing the road builders and the people building the schools or whatever more money to buy that rock, and then that sales tax revenue goes out of the county, and we pay to fix the roads. So I'm looking at this from a long-term economic standpoint. I don't think that those 1,500-foot regulations are sustainable for the long-term future of the county myself. And Pettis, you and I usually agree on a lot of things, but I think on this one, we need to start thinking about the future on it.
I understand what you're talking about, what you're saying. You're talking about Potts too over there, and I go by that quite often, and I mess up my truck every time I go through there. But and I remember that community down there, and I remember as they have expanded down there and what it did to that community and how they expanded. And I guess I look back at that too. Do we want to continue to expand what we do too? So I say in, and I don't think it hurts every now and then to agree to disagree.
Well, I think you're going to have the same wear and tear on the roads, only you're just going to be bringing the traffic in from other counties as opposed to our trucks going and getting it. I don't know that changing that for us is going to be the same net gain. I think it could potentially be a wash.
I just see fewer road miles if the quarry's closer to where the school's being built, or closer to town than it is running it from across the county line. Just more miles. The difference.
I have no problem with the 750 also. I've got a farm. You talk about the one just over in Bedford County. I'm there. I'm across the road. I don't have a house on that farm, but I'm across the road. My house is further than 1,500 feet east of there. And when they blast the quarry, I don't think it hurts my house any more than it hurts over there. So a few hundred feet, it just makes these quarries we have lifespan a little longer versus somebody else coming in to one another.
Right, and understand that there's, even if there's an existing quarry that wants to apply, they have to go through the process of identifying the property and rezoning, even for an expansion. This isn't going to give them, if this were to be changed, they don't automatically, they still have to go through the same process, the rezoning, they still have to go through the special exception process. It doesn't change just because we change the setbacks. Especially with new quarries. If a new quarry comes in, even with 750, we can look at it and say, this is not a good location for this, and this isn't going to work, and then not approve the rezoning. So, again, that part of the process I don't want to change.
True.
I guess part of my thinking is so many times our hands are tied, and we just tell the citizens, we have to approve this or that thing a certain way because of the way the laws are written. This is one of those times we can protect them. So voluntarily giving that up to me, I feel like you're giving away something you don't have to give away.
What do you want from us?
I guess direction more than anything. Are you wanting to move this forward to a public hearing? Do you want more research done on it? If so, what kind of research? I think we've done what you've asked us to do at this point. I'm just kind of
happy medium. It is currently now 1,500 feet, and you want to change it to 750. But for schools, it's 1,000.
No, for school it's a mile. It's a mile. Yeah.
Okay. Never mind.
Well, is Brown Chapel School a mile? Is Brown Chapel School a mile from that quarry?
It is. The current operation, yes. If they want to do some expansion, they would have to kind of look at the land around it because it's right at a mile. Some of that property that if they were to expand into it, it would be within that mile of the school.
How do you measure that mile?
It's by property line. It's like
Really?
yeah.
We would take it one step at a time and recommend 1,000 square foot instead of 1,000 feet instead of 1,500 square feet. Would that be reasonable?
Well,
for us
I
to
think
take a
maybe
look
the
at?
thing to do, if you want to move it forward, maybe we just move it forward, but we're looking at some possible changes to it, and then kind of see where the discussion goes from there after the public hearing. Now, this isn't like a rezoning where we notify anybody, because this is just an ordinance amendment. There'd be really nobody to notify.
Yeah.
But we can at least see what kind of comments or discussion is brought up at the public hearing, if nothing else, and then go from there.
Notifying the existing quarries?
That normally wouldn't do anything like that. I mean, they might. I know some of them are following this process, what we're trying to do, so I'm sure they'd be aware. But I don't know if we'd come right out and just notify them specifically, unless that was the request
I'm
that you
kind of
wanted us
with
to.
Jeff and Jim. I know a lot of it's coming out of Cannon County also right now. I think the 1,000 feet may be the first consideration on the change.
I have kind of mixed emotions about this whole thing. We've been through rock quarry discussions that took hours and hours and hours, and but I also know that our county's growing and changing, and we've got businesses that are wanting to expand, and I just think that we need to at least listen to what is appropriate and maybe not just arbitrarily say no. We've got something that we want. That there are opportunities, I believe, for input, not only from the public but from businesses as well. Not necessarily saying that we're going to make a change, but I think we've got some folks that are wanting to expand additional businesses right now for future consideration, and I would suggest to this commission, and I'm not dictating, but I would suggest that we move the thing forward for a public hearing and at least have some discussion. We could have further information as to how the change in our ordinance could affect just moving it from whatever 1,500 to something else, how blasting could affect, and maybe other controls that could be put on it. If I remember right, there was one expansion that was proposed 5 or 6 years ago, and the proposal was to make that quarry operation much more modern. In essence, a lot of indoor things that would create less noise and less dust and make the homeowners' lives around it much more feasible. But of course, we rejected that. And if someone wanted to expand, could this commission require that expansion to include some of the more modern and update?
Well, I think so. When we redid our regulation, I mean, there's quite a bit of information in there that they have to provide under the updated regulations when we updated our ordinance, as far as, geology of the site and different things. I don't have it right in front of me, but the regulations for these is several pages long, as far as the things that they have to provide for us on the front end, the plans and different things. So the fact that it has to go through rezoning and then special exception approval, I think that there are reasonable conditions with the special exception that you can put on an application like this. So to answer your question, I think that, yes, I think you could ultimately do that. But like you said, I think the industry just as a whole has evolved over time. And I think the application, actually, it's been a little longer. It's been like 11 years. I think it was 2008 when they came in,
Wow.
if I remember right. Time flies. But yeah, so that's, I don't think that's unreasonable in my mind.
it's a subject that nobody wants to address. I know you don't, and I know that we don't want to hear it, but it's, I guess, part of our job is to at least have some discussion on it. So I'm not sure that what would happen is that if we had a public hearing and this commission decided to make a change to our ordinance, it would be a recommended change that would have to go before the full county commission, and the full county commission would make the final decision. So we're just, once again, a recommending body and not a final decision-making body. So, Greg, come on up, bud.
While you're making those decisions, please keep in mind that mineral severance tax is 3.5% of the highway department's budget. So it does matter if we're going out of the county to get these resources.
So anything harvested within the county, you get 3.5%. Is that what you're saying? Okay. Let me ask you a question. Would it be beneficial if Mike put together the current quarries that if they expanded, if we altered from 1,500, if he put a radius bar out there from, like, say 1,000 to 750, what residents that might affect, or residential properties or commercial properties that may affect? It may only be a few. I can only think of one quarry where residents are kind of backed up close to the boundaries. I mean,
Are you kind of wanting a map that shows quarryable area on the property, I guess?
Where the current quarry property line is,
Mhm.
and then if you expand, or if we reduce that distance, so in other words, if they bring their
If they bring their operation out
towards
yeah.
the property line, does that affect this many more additional houses?
Mhm.
I guess would that help anybody's vision or decision-making process if we knew that the expansion all of a sudden brought one more house or 20 more houses into play? I don't know if a visual like that would help.
I think it's always smart to see the impact of your decision.
Yeah, I mean, well, you know, when you bring up the report, let me bring that up real quick.
You understand what I'm asking?
Yeah, well, let me
Mike?
show you this. Let me at least show you what we've done under that. This is really sensitive.
No, it's 20. That's the 20.
When we did the report, now again, this hasn't been updated with the new information, but there was something in there.
Seems like when Rogers Group came 10 years ago or whatever, we had kind of a radius.
Yeah, well, and this is a map that we did do.
Yeah, so-
Now, what this is doing, now again, this is just a random piece of property in the county. There's no quarry on this or anything. This is just for display purposes. This is on a piece of property that's about 630 acres in size, and you can see every layer, if you will, corresponds to, this is the quarryable area, because the regulation as it's written is from the quarryable area.
Mhm.
That's what we're looking at. So 1,500 foot, if that's the setback, you're looking at usable acres about 60. If it's 1,000 foot, you're looking at roughly 200. If it's 750, you're looking at about 280, 288, 290. 500 feet, you're looking at more than that. And of course, there's none, and it's the whole property. Is this kind of what you're talking about? Something like this?
Well,
Yeah.
this is very valuable, but I'm also thinking, if you look at the hatched area, which apparently is the
Yeah,
property.
right.
What I'm talking about may be irrelevant, because you will never, I was thinking if you had residential or commercial property outside the boundary of that hatched area, if they would be impacted if you expanded from 1,500 feet to say 500 feet, does that impact then, but it wouldn't.
Well, what you're looking at, right, I mean, based on it, I mean, you're still, right, it's on, it's in, right, this is internal.
not an
Yeah, an
external.
external, right. Because, I mean, yes, it's getting closer to the property line.
Yeah.
I mean, so in that sense, yeah, it is getting closer. But again, this is what you're looking at from at least quarryable area on this particular, and again, there's no quarry on this, it's just, this was just
So
one we
each
used.
color change here is 250 feet.
Well,
right.
well, 500, from 1,500 to 1,000, then 750 doing 500, so it's, that first one's a little bit bigger jump.
So, okay, from red to yellow's 500 feet.
Correct. Mhm.
So you've doubled, that color change has doubled the size of quarry.
On this particular property, yes. Now, that may not be exact, depending on how the property
Yeah,
is
that-
shaped and
this is just
everything,
like
of course, right.
Hypothetical.
Well, if you even go from the 1,500 to the 1,000, they've tripled
Oh, hell.
the amount of land that they can quarry.
Oh, yeah. As Mr. Aberwater pointed out, if you look at the chart, you go from 60 acres for 1,500 to almost 290 for if you cut it in half, you've 5 times the amount of quarryable area. So it's an exponential mathematical equation. Interesting.
And there's no denying the need for the rock is there. And the need is only gonna be higher as time goes by.
We've got to have rock.
Well, I guess my question is, are we not being served currently? I mean, are we having to go outside the county to meet our needs?
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So-
A lot.
Well, I'm talking about as a county, Greg, are we buying a lot of rock outside the county?
We bid rock on an annual basis, so we currently, stay within the county for a vendor. But I know a lot of contractors are going outside the county. Some of it's straight up logistics.
You count the number of loads that go past my road every day. It's 25 or more.
From Canyon County?
Yes.
Trey, you got something?
Yes, sir. I guess I'm in a unique position. I'm a developer of county business and maintaining everything. So we're kind of affected by all aspects of this discussion. A lot of our stone that's coming in, unless we quarry, it's coming from Wilson County. And the quarry owner, Rogers Group, for one, owns quarries over there as well. And they've got a longer lifespan over there. More reserves because they are confined. And I'm not trying to point y'all one way or the other, but it's a fact. They're selling close from the quarry on Burnt Knob, and anything that's beyond a certain mileage, they're bringing from Wilson County into Roseville because they've got more reserve and more volume over there. If you gave them more reserve and more volume, whether it's 250 feet or 300 feet or whatever, they may move. I would look for them to move that the other way. In other words, they would haul more from this quarry and less from Wilson County in county.
But that's going to be,
And we're also affected by the blasting because we're close. We've got a lot of schools there, and I can tell you from development, building, and whatever, the seismic implications from the residential builder shooting sewer line shakes our buildings more than the rock quarries do. At a mile away. It's a drastic difference.
Looking at this chart here, if there were developments around this piece of property and the setback was 1,000 instead of 1,500, statistically, would there be any impact on the residents?
You mean from an operations or blasting standpoint? You'd almost need to get with a geologist to be able to answer that question, honestly. I'm not qualified to really answer that.
So
I mean, it would be closer, so, but.
So why would we want to move it if we think that it's going to have a negative impact? If it has a potentially negative impact on residents. If it's not, why would we not move it? But if it is, why would we move it? Those are the questions I think that are on some people's minds right here. If this piece of property were surrounded by some homes and some residents, and we wanted to move the setback, let's say, to 1,000 square feet, how would we know, Doug, that it would have potential negative impact on the residents of that lived around there? I think that would weigh on most of our minds as much as anything else. We want to protect the residents, but we also, I think, want to listen to what our current businesses and the needs of the county are as well. You know what I'm saying?
Right, I understand. Yeah.
Jeff, didn't the blasting class that we did explain that, in that they have to put the seismographs along the perimeter of the property, and so as they become closer, they have to cut back or reduce their intensities of their blasts in order to stay within the requirements at the property line?
Yeah.
So whether it's 100 feet or 1,000 feet, they'll just use bigger blasts at 1,000 feet than they would at 100 feet.
I see. I see.
He also mentioned that, technology has come a long way than when most of these quarries were started. And highly regulated, is what I remember.
Let me go back to my original question. If you took a current quarry, and if you, like Google Earth, and you had the residential homes or commercial businesses around the perimeter of a quarry property, and if we moved the actual quarrying limitations out 500 feet, which means you move that radius out 500 feet, how many more residents or commercial businesses would that encompass, which kind of gets to Jeff's concern? If you're going to move the blast zone 500 feet, which means you're pushing it externally out 500 feet, sort of, kind of, does that, how many more homes or businesses does that bring into that theoretic? Am I making sense?
Well,
probably not.
Well, I think it goes back to this is an internal setback as opposed to external.
I mean,
But-
if you still had houses out here, they're still going to be
The same
that same distance. But
yeah.
like they were saying, that they've got.
But they're going to get, well.
They're going
if
to
you
get closer to the. They're going to get closer to the
If you have a house
blast area.
that's sitting on the D for Rutherford, right? If I own a house right there, and I'm used to a certain amount of sensitivity or blast every day, but if you're going to move the red zone all the way out to the yellow zone,
Well, you're 500 feet closer.
yeah, I'm 500. So
right.
my intensity might be a little more severe.
It should not be.
Well, I think that's kind of what.
But I guess my question is, if I also have a house now that is on the R in Rutherford, which is about the same distance you've expanded internally, am I going to all of a sudden, in my house on the F in Rutherford, going to have the same impact that the D used to have? Does that make sense? Does anybody follow me?
Well, I think that might get back to what Jim was just saying in that training, where they said if they're closer to the lines, then they have to use lesser
They
charges.
lower the intensity,
Yeah.
but increase the
Where's that
number of
line
blasts, and
measured?
it's in a series.
Where's the 15
Right,
feet
but
measured
quarry
from today?
operation is more than just the blast. It's the
Right.
ongoing
the dust, it's the-
operation,
yeah.
the noise pollution. So it is going to impact them, even if we're not talking about just when they blast. You're talking about the ongoing operation and the impact on those residents. From the beeping of the trucks backing up, all those things you're going to hear now when trees come down.
That's
That maybe
within their
you had a
defined
buffer
property.
there before. That buffer's going to be gone. So.
Which I'm of the same concern that Rhonda had. If we're concerned about protecting our county assets, I'm concerned
Because
about
we're not measuring that.
protecting the citizens. And by expanding this, we're putting perhaps some of those in jeopardy. I mean, I don't want people calling about crack foundations any more than you guys do. And that's a concern. So I'm just wondering, if we expand internally within the property, does that have a greater impact externally?
Right.
And
Well, also weigh that you're giving existing quarries more life.
right.
And so they've already been operating, the dust and noise is already there for those. I mean,
I know, but if you move that,
right.
if you move that because the house D has already lived with that, and he's already hardened to that problem. But now if you move that out, and now all of a sudden the house on the F in Rutherford this is a new concept for them. Now they've got the dust, now they've got the noise, now they got the beeping.
Right.
Now that's a new thing for them, and maybe that's the guy I want to protect.
Right.
That's what I'm curious about. If we do this, if you did a Google Earth, are we talking about 1 or 2 houses? Are we talking about 0 houses?
Well, I guess a lot of it would depend on what's in the area, and well, you were going back to existing quarries, I guess, that's what you were talking about.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because
Say you take a polygon, offset it 500 feet, how many houses are
Yeah.
in that area?
Right.
Is it 50 houses or is it 5,000?
That's what I want.
We've got a map right there.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you
We
so
do.
much for summing
Yeah, I
that
send
up.
it just like that.
Yeah.
I think we can do that very easily.
Yeah, we can look at that.
Because if it's a new quarry, and they'll have to deal with our new limitations.
Right.
And if it's a new quarry, chances are they're not going to be building near existing subdivisions. They're going to want raw land somewhere out in the middle of nowhere.
But what are the ultimate logistics? What are the ultimate logistics from a quarry perspective? So we let them expand. If it's still logistically cheaper or more efficient for them to truck from outside because of roads, because of traffic, because of whatnot, are we really gaining anything to begin with? Because that's where I go back to the economic side of it. If it's more efficient to truck it down 231 or 840 to get to locations versus trying to get it from Twin Oaks or Burnt Knob, or trucking it from the quarry south in Bedford County up, it's, what are we really gaining? That becomes more of a business side more than it does to us saying, all right, we're going to give them an extra 500 feet to expand. If we gave that to them today, would it affect anything? And that's, I don't know that any of us can answer that. It'd be more of a question for the quarry themselves.
I think the big concern with that is 20 years from now, when these quarries start to run out of capacity, and then we're in the same situation that we're in with the dump. Now what do? We just got to go somewhere else. And
Yeah, but my concern still today is we ain't got the infrastructure to handle it anyway. You can't drive through this town or this county anywhere.
Mike's working on that.
Jim's helping us.
I mean, I'm being serious as I can be.
It's a problem.
So I'm really not concerned about expanding a quarry, and the impact of that is when we may not even can handle the logistics of it anyway. And I understand the impacts to Greg and his group, but we may be able to fix another problem another way in helping these quarries versus just getting an expansion, especially when he ain't got an application in 13 years to expand. I mean, I want to be prepared. Don't get me wrong. And the landfill is a prime example, and it's duly noted.
The other, you can look at this, I don't know how many different ways, and if you think about it, well, that makes sense. But if you look at it another way, you'll say, well, that makes sense. And they conflict with each other. Just as an example, if this quarry had been here, if this were a quarry, and it had been here 30 years, and the houses that are surrounding it had only been there 8 years, are you going to penalize that property owner for those houses coming in after he already had an operation and he wants to expand his operation, and we say no because you're going to affect those homeowners that are younger than the quarry? So, you can look at it a whole number of different ways, and that's what I'm concerned about is we've got a business that wants to expand, and we tell them no. Are we arbitrarily making a decision that has legal implications? Is that what you're also saying, Doug? That if we say no, we're going to leave it the way it is, and that property owner says you're making a decision based upon something that I have no control over because these people chose to build there. Would there be legal implications there? Could there be legal implications there?
Well, I mean, at this point, they'd have to go after the regulations as they exist. And I can't, really speculate as to what argument they may have on something like that. I mean, they certainly could say that. They could just say, we want to expand, and based on the regulations as they exist, there's no way we can. And that may be how they come at it. I mean, if that were to happen, I don't know.
How long have we had this rule in place?
Well, this all came about when we brought in the new zoning ordinance, so that'd be 2013. When we had regulations prior to that, but you'll remember when we were going through the update of the ordinance, we had pretty significant discussion even at that time about this, and that's when these regulations, the way they are currently, were
What was
passed.
the setback at that prior to 2013 then?
I believe the 1500 was still there. And Jim, you'll have to forgive me, I don't have it right in front of me, what the older regs were. A lot of it is, as far as the setbacks go, is fairly similar. I think we added on a lot more requirements as far as what we look for in an application. I think we did add a lot there, but as far as the setbacks themselves, I don't think they were just a whole lot different at that point.
So it sounds to me like, based on your concern, changing it is more arbitrary than leaving it the way it is. If it's been this way,
Maybe.
And you have to remember, we'd have to have the public hearing, whatever. I just go back to the public hearing when we had somebody trying to do a outside shooting range, and the crowd that showed up just for that.
Mm-hmm.
And I think when we do the public hearing on this, you're gonna see somewhat of the same thing, because I think back when you go all the way back to 13, when we discussed this, we had just had a change somewhat in a quarry somewhere.
Well, there was a pending application at that point.
We
right?
had a lot of people show up on that one right there.
Mhm.
And I remember, and I think that's why we said that we're just gonna keep it where it's at.
Right. Now, understand, again, we're not talking about specific property. We're just looking at regulations at this point. So the notification's different in that regard. So,
and it's always better to have this conversation when you don't have a pending application. So I
Right.
appreciate
Oh, sure.
the timing of this
Right.
conversation for
Right.
sure.
If it's economic, I go back to if Rogers Group and Hoover and whoever else felt like they were being minimized by our regulations, they'd be knocking Doug's door down and our doors down, and our phones would be ringing off the hook saying, hey, you got to give us another 500 feet because we can't sustain, because we can more efficiently and economically bring stuff out of this quarry versus the other, but because of our limitations inside, we can't do that. So, I mean, there's a lot of things I think we're going about it the right way. I'm whatever decision we go with, ultimately, I think we've done a good job and continue to do a good job of vetting it. But I'm trying to think holistically, the big picture.
Well,
here.
I actually had the same thought that you did when Trey was speaking, and that was, it's up to Rogers Group. If they get the contract, it's up to them where they bring the rock from. We don't get to decide what location they pull it from.
But if they did come here and say, hey, we could benefit from the regulation change, and it would have positive impact to Greg and his team and to the county as a whole, then absolutely I'd be the first to say, all right, what can we do to make it right?
So it sounds like the consensus is we just wait for the squeaky wheel.
But as a developer, you're paying for it anyway. I mean, they're just passing on where they haul it from here to there or there to here.
But
They're passing it on to us
Here
anyway.
again, I'm trying to think 20 years down the road.
I understand that, and I
Yeah.
agree. I don't
I don't want to
disagree
end
with
up in a
that.
pickle, because as we become more dense and our needs for gravel become more intense, and yet we have people that are crowding in on these quarries, it's going to become impossible to change the regulations to 750 or 1,000. We can always go from 750 to 1,000, but we'll never go from 1,000 to 750 20 years from now. And we've just backed ourselves into a corner because we weren't planning down the road.
That's a good
Well, my mindset is I want us to be less dense because we ain't got the infrastructure to support any more density than what we got today.
That's not gonna happen.
Well, let me just make one comment, kind of on, I think, Chip, what you were just saying. As far as getting calls, personally, I have had conversations about this, even with some of the quarries. There was one, ended up being annexed into Smyrna anyway, but there was one off of the Hickory Grove Road area where I had some meetings with some of the folks that were looking to do that, and they had concerns about the regulations, as far as how they could meet those. They were looking to go the planned development route, which they could kind of create their own, in a sense, I suppose. But, I wasn't a big fan of that particular method to do it. I mean, that is a way they could do it. They could do a planned development for a quarry application. I'd feel more comfortable if they did something, if they want to do a plan development, fine, but I'd be more comfortable if they did it with the regulations that were in place as opposed to trying to create their own, but that application ended up not happening. But there have been other conversations. So, I mean, it's not in a vacuum, you know, I just decided, hey, one day I'm going to look at this. You know, it didn't quite happen that way. So.
Does most of our school construction quarry on site?
No, sir, we've only done that one time. We did that at Rockville, for Rockville Middle and Rockville High. That's the only time we did it because we had the property and the material. We're buying. I take that back. If there's a large enough quantity, then the contractor has the option to quarry on site, like for a detention pond, and then manufacture the gravel there. Now, it can't leave the site without a permit.
Right.
But we can manufacture our own on site to
Yeah.
reduce our costs, and we do.
And that's
that.
what I was referring to. On the construction site itself, the material that's removed could be quarried
Yes, sir.
for that site.
Yes, sir. And we do that every opportunity we get, because it's beneficial for us.
Yeah.
I hate to put anybody on the spot, but we've had some conversation, and what do we do, Doug? We just not do anything and it just dies? Does staff have some kind of a recommendation? Do you want us to do something? Would you prefer us to do something?
Well, I mean, I guess, like I said earlier, at this point, I'm just looking for guidance. You know, I don't see any harm personally of moving it to the public hearing just to see what kind of comments we may get. And if we decide to do some more study after that, then fine. But, you know, this is something we've brought up. We've looked into it. We're just looking for direction at this point.
No, public hearing may be painful, but you might be able to hear both sides of the story.
When was that last educational session with the geologist?
It was back in June, as I remember. Yeah, I wasn't present because, you know, my son was having some medical procedure done. But
If we could refresh on the notes on that and the consequences of moving those zones before a public hearing, I think we could educate ourselves there.
yeah, I believe so. I think that was taped, so we can get copies to everybody. That shouldn't be too difficult.
Why don't you come back at our next 9 o'clock meeting?
Well, that won't be until next year because,
True.
yeah, this will be the last day meeting that I call it a day meeting, but these are our last day meetings we'll have this year because we're getting into the November, December. We only have the 2 night meetings, one in November, one in December.
That's true. But is there still any significant timing issues with that, though? Could we just still bring that back at our next 9 o'clock meeting?
I mean, if that's what you ultimately want, but again, I just need to know what you want me to bring. You know, I mean, I mean, basically what you're talking about. But
If you could just provide us with the educational materials again, so I could refresh myself on that, I'm okay with proceeding with a public hearing to get feedback out.
And maybe Mike,
to see if we need to change or leave it alone,
Map
but
thing.
I'd like to
Mike's
educate.
maps about the existing quarries and the number of houses.
Mhm.
And that map, yeah, that map.
About the map?
Did we record that training session?
I believe we did. Yeah, now, again, I wasn't here, but I want to say we did.
Is that accessible online or do
We would
burn a
get, yeah,
CD?
we don't put the training online, but we can get
Burn a
copies of
CD or something?
DVDs, yeah, DVDs for it. We can do that.
Great.
Or if you have a Dropbox or weed transfer or something, you can put it.
Yeah,
on
I'll talk with
something.
our OIT gurus and see what they would suggest. Yeah.
It was a good training session. I will just say this. If you're a hammer, the whole world's a nail. And that's the same way I kind of took the geologists, you know, in their mind, they're comfortable with it. That's their business, that's their industry. And so they're going to say everything they can to make you feel comfortable with it. I just remember all those citizens with all their anecdotal information coming and standing and listening to hours of that objection that they just can't erase from my mind. You know, people who've had to live with those quarries. So that's who I remember.
Well, and I agree with what we talked about previously. The water lines, the sewer lines, and things that are going on now are just as close to my house as anyone else's, and they rattle my windows too. And I don't feel like that's as controlled as a quarry is. So.
I think those are less controlled than what a quarry is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I also remember some of those public hearings, and just just hearing homeowner after homeowner after homeowner getting up saying the same things, their ultimate goal was to shut it down. Stop it, shut it down, not to regulate it anymore, but just to shut it down. And I think there were some, if I'm not mistaken, there were some concessions made by I believe it was the Rogers Group at the time. This is what we're going to do to make your life better. And the homeowners said no
So the trust
to
just
those
wasn't there.
things.
The trust factor was just low.
I think someone asked last time, do we know how many years or estimated years of service life we have on our current quarries that are in the county? Or, I mean, there's
Off the
probably
top
no
of my
way to
head,
share
yeah,
that with us,
right. I
but
mean, off the top of my head, no.
I didn't think
I
it
don't
would
know
be.
that.
It's probably
yeah.
not readily available, so.
I don't know if there's a good answer. What do we do, guys? You're going to have to give us, you're going to have to give Doug some guidance. Where do we go from here? Do we have a public hearing, or do we get some more information back? Where do you guys
struggle
want to
with
go?
what you're saying, having that capacity for the future, and we won't be able to move those out in the future, but yet I just feel arbitrary right now that we're just deciding to just move it to 750, or if it's 1,000 or 1,250 or whatever. I just don't have a good sense of what that would be. I know that wasn't the answer you were looking for.
Well, I don't want it. It's always good, the American way we do here. Let's put it off another month, and let's put it off till January, because we're gonna need some heat in January anyway. We'll get some heat in January if we do have a public hearing. But if we want some more information from that you've asked for, let's do that in January, and then have the public hearing
Okay.
February.
I think you've done all the research on this spreadsheet that we need from other counties. I think it's just where do we find our comfort level and feel like we're educated enough to make a decision one way or the other.
I think even though a geologist or whatever, I hate to bring an expert in and then I say, well, we don't trust you, and that's kind of what was happening. But as part of that information, if you could bring whoever back, and with the maps that Mike was suggesting that we put together, the map, and get some input from that expert as to how it might affect that surrounding area. So the map, the geologist giving us some input, and then what Lee was talking about, maybe we have that at our next 9 o'clock meeting.
And I don't know, and Doug, you'd have to see if you think this would even be appropriate, but, that situation in Smyrna was a super specific set of circumstances. It's not the kind of thing that's going to be a run-of-the-mill situation. But Smyrna and their ordinance is stricter than ours, and they found a way to annex it in and make it palatable, make it work. I'm curious to know, would it be interesting to have Kevin Rigsby or Brian Hercules or somebody come talk to us about that example of how they made it work inside of their very strict, ordinance, since it's stricter than ours.
Mhm.
Is that anything that would benefit
Well,
us
I can.
at all?
Well, I think I can. I mean, I know Kevin well enough. I can just call him up and ask him.
Yeah.
My guess, I'm speculating, so I probably shouldn't even say it. My guess is they went with a plan development. That's the only way I can see how that worked. But
That's how they did it.
it is okay.
But
So
I'm thinking about the
yeah.
specifics of, because they had to, in deciding on a plan development, they had all the same concerns that we're going to have. So there had to be some extensive, I would think, conversation and consideration about all the elements of that development that brought them to a point of peace to pass it. And so that's the kind of thing that I'm listening for, is what was that screening process, and are those things that maybe we need to fold into our overall ordinance? I don't know. I'm just looking for
Let me,
solutions.
like I said, and I know Kevin well enough. I can call him up and just go sit down with him and chat about it. So that's I can do that. That's easy enough. So I guess at this point, we just kind of
Pump the brakes.
and just I'll get this information together and then kind of report back. I guess is kind of what I'm hearing, at least at this point. Yeah.
Even bring in some of the people that we were talking about, just to give us more input. The person that did can't remember his name, but the person that did the presentation earlier, You know, and if we have some specific examples, and how it might affect, if it's, in his opinion, it would have zero effect on the residents. It might impact our decision a little bit more. We would have to trust that person, and his or her expertise. So that type of information, it could even end up being kind of a mini training session for us, and or an updated training session for us. But that type of information, if we wanted to bring it back and do it before our 9 o'clock meeting, so we'd at least have some time restraints on the thing. We could do something like that, Doug.
Okay.
So that's where we're going. Not till January. Our January, it would be late January meeting of the Planning Commission. That'd give a couple of months for us to put some information together and just disseminate that information to us, I guess, and then we'll decide where we go from there.
Doug, can you refresh me where that educational, the person that led that, where was
TTL.
he from? Okay, TTL.
Brought a
so-
team.
okay, That's right, okay.
Brought a geologist, a blasting expert, and a quarry expert. There's 3 of them.
Would,
I slept since then, I couldn't remember.
would it be, as Craig said, be nice and a nice warm conversation? Would it be too volatile if we ask the blasting expert and the geologist of TTL and maybe a blasting expert from Rogers Group to be at that training session and have both industries chat to us about technology? Or you want to keep those two separate for the time being?
Are we talking training session, or are we talking
No, I'm talking
public
training
hearing?
session.
We're
I'm talking about
about
training session.
Another training session.
I'm just talking out loud.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, we can certainly
ask.
explore. Yeah, I mean,
One who's doing it for business and one who does it for engineering may
Regulation,
have two
yeah.
different opinions.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm just throwing it out.
Let's kind of chase it a little bit and see what we can come up with. Yeah.
Okay, so that's where we're going. We'll have some updated additional information that staff will bring back to us, maybe with some experts' input in late January. I don't know if that gets us at least off of not doing anything, but doing something coming back in January. Does that make sense, Doug?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Is there anything else we need to do?
I can't think of anything, and I don't have anything else other under staff reports unless you had anything. So
Mike's got an 11 o'clock, and
Yes, and the next meeting is Tuesday, not Monday. You want to say that, or did you do that already?
Oh, the next planning commission meeting?
it is.
Oh yeah,
It'll
it's
be-
on the bottom
it'll
of
be
your
Tuesday,
agendas there. Yeah, it's a
at-
because of the holiday of the Veterans Day. Yes, it'll be the 12th of November as opposed to the 11th because we won't be here on the 11th. And I like you guys, but yeah.
Everybody got that? It'll be Tuesday the 12th.
And we'll send out a reminder like we always do on the agendas and everything.
Okay. Thank you. We're adjourned.
Thank you.